Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hutchins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Association of Nonprofits, and it's great to see you here, have you join us today to talk about a couple of new agencies, offices within Maine state government. MANP Connects, for those of you who are new to the program, MANP Connects is a program that we started in April of 2020 in response to the pandemic and the need to provide a space where we could come together across the state as nonprofits to talk about how the pandemic was impacting our organizations and what we could do about it. And so we did that for a few months so that people could call in on Friday mornings and learn more about what was happening in Washington, D.C. and Augusta and across the state, learn from peers and connect. And then we discovered that after the immediate emergency started to calm down and we took a break for a minute as MANP staff, we discovered in talking with many of you that MANP Connects continues to be a space where we can learn from one another. We can elevate some of the new things that are happening in the state of Maine that impacts nonprofits broadly, and provides just a place for connection. Because what we have found through MANP Connects is that it's really helpful to not feel too isolated out there in Maine communities when you're doing work that's focused on public benefit and the common good, that it's helpful to know that you're not alone, that the tie that binds for all of us is that we are people with purpose and we are putting mutual community benefit above our own personal private interests. And being connected that way and wanting to strengthen Maine communities is a super empowering message to send. So glad you're here this morning. In particular, for this morning, the governor, at the beginning of the year, made the move to form what's called a new office, the Maine Office of Community Affairs, or MOCA. And this office is a standalone state office that partners with Maine communities across the entire state. It combines several offices that existed previously. And the goal with this is to strengthen the planning and implementation at the local level. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. I went up to Augusta and I was able to speak with the Maine Commission on Community Service. And I learned a little bit more about the Maine Office of Community Affairs and how Volunteer Maine, which is also known as the Maine Commission for Community Service, helps build and support state volunteer communities. And I learned by participating in that conversation that MOCA also has the Maine State Resilience Office, which is helping communities prepare for the threats of climate change. And so I thought I would invite the two directors of those two programs, only two of the several that fall under the Maine Office of Community Affairs, to come and talk to us this morning about their work, particularly with an eye towards how nonprofits could get engaged in and supporting their work and making sure that we are cultivating really productive cross-sector state government and nonprofit partnerships, because at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is the strength, health, well-being, and resilience of Maine communities. And so we know at MANP that we want to be doing what we can to be cultivating strong, respectful, mutual partnerships between those two agencies. Sound good? Great. Okay, so I'm going to get started with introducing Brian and Brett. Brian, if you're right there, great. Nice to see you this morning. How are you?
Well, thanks. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So everyone, Brian M. Brett is the director of the Maine State Resilience Office, and he has dedicated his career to supporting communities with regards to preparations for and addressing threats to climate change in communities and he'll do a much better job explaining than I am. So I'm going to stop right there. But we're really fortunate that Brian has been working with Maine state government for several years now on these issues. So I'm going to jump right in and ask you, Brian, to take a little bit of a step back outside of your director hat, exclusively at the office, and maybe shedding a little bit of light on what, from your perspective, with this move to the creation of MOCA, the Maine Office of Community Affairs, what to you, how does that elevate our ability as nonprofits, communities, state government work together to really lift up what we all care about here in Maine?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. It's so great to be here with you all this morning. Before coming into state government service, I was 15 years in the nonprofit sector, and so this certainly feels like a little bit of coming home. Happy to be here with you all this morning, and I think this is a really great way to start the conversation. When the initial vision for MOCA, Maine Office of Community Affairs, was to pull a number of programs, as you said, that had been distributed across state government under one roof, with the purpose of making it easier for communities and other folks to access the resources that they need to tackle their most challenging issues in their communities. And so the governor and the legislature got together and decided to move 7 programs under the one roof at MOCA. So that's the Maine Coastal Program, the Municipal Planning Assistance Program, the Housing Opportunity Program, Volunteer Maine, the Building Codes Office, the Floodplain Management Program, the Community Resilience Partnership. And then on top of that, as you said, to create a new state resilience office to be a center of activity for climate resilience in our communities. And there's a lot of overlaps between these issues. And so it's really great to have all of these colleagues, all of these programs and resources in one place, so that, as I said, communities have more of a one-stop shop to find this information, to find the expertise that they need. But also so that we're making sure that the programming and the resources that we're providing to communities are aligned and consistent with one another. And so one of the examples of a product that we're hoping to launch in the next couple of weeks is a funding finder, a tool that you can use online to help locate funding opportunities, whether they're grants or incentive programs, state or federal, to do the work that we need to do across all of these issues, from housing to land use to resiliency. That's one opportunity that we're really excited to bring. And I think we want to do that not just within the programs and the opportunities that we have at MOCA, but across state government. And so we're getting to know our colleagues in other programs that do this work in DOT, in DEP, other agencies across the government. So the other thing that we're going to stand up in a couple of weeks is a phone hotline, and we'll be able to you have a human being answering the phone and providing sort of that warm connection to wherever the answer to the caller's question might be, whether it's in our office or whether it's in another part of state government. We can help people navigate state government more easily. And so that I think gets to the access part of the question, just trying to make more of state government more accessible to more people across the state. And while the Maine Office of Community Affairs has the word community in our title, and it appears oriented towards municipality, I think the real truth is that Maine is a small state, and we need robust partnerships from everybody to get this work done at the state level and at the community level. And so we very frequently partner with nonprofits through our grant programs, through the technical assistance opportunities that we offer, and through a lot of the work that Britt is going to talk about in a couple of minutes that involves volunteers. And so I'll let her talk about that when you get to her. But I'll start with an example of a program that we run through the State Resilience Office called the Community Resilience Partnership, which has dozens and dozens of contracts and grant agreements with nonprofits, ranging from larger institutions that we all know, like the Allen Institute and Gulf of Maine Research Institute, to smaller community-based or issue-oriented organizations like Center for Ecology-Based Economy in Western Maine, A Climate to Thrive in the MDI region, Window Dressers and Grow Smart Maine, who work statewide. So lots of different sizes and types of organizations that we partner with. We also partner with the 10 regional councils across the state they're legislatively created organizations, but they are organized for the most part as nonprofits. And many of those organizations are proposing partnerships in their grant applications to us with land trusts and libraries and food banks. And so there's lots of different kinds of organizations that get involved through the work that we do with our grant programs.
Yeah, that's really cool. Can you talk a little bit more about this, the word resilience? I think that just wearing my, if director of most of our 89% of our nonprofits in Maine have budgets under $500,000 a year. So very, very small nonprofits. So just put on my hat for a moment as the director of a small nonprofit and hear what you're talking about, hear about resilience. And as you've been saying, all of this is interconnected, right? Climate change, the impacts health, the economy, it goes on and on in terms of the how that works. I'm just curious about, in your mind, how would you counsel, having with experience in nonprofits, how would you advise someone who sees all this activity going on and isn't quite sure how they fit in, but they feel like they should? I'm just curious as to your thinking, especially understanding what nonprofits are like.
Yeah, thanks. Resilience is a word that I think has taken on a lot of meanings to many people over the last 10 or 15 years. And
Yeah.
but in the broadest terms, I think when you look at how people are using the word, it really kind of boils down to anticipating what future disruptions might occur to your organization, to your community, to the state, and start to think about ways to prepare so that you can bounce back quickly from those disruptions when they occur. And so when we talk about climate, there's certainly quite a few potential disruptions out there, but they tend to be oriented around natural disasters or sort of slow moving environmental change, which may lead to economic change. But you can certainly apply the meaning of that to any number of disruptions, whether they're sort of broader economic disruptions or local, significant changes in policy. I mean, there's lots of different ways to apply that definition. Through the Community Resilience Partnership Program that I mentioned earlier, for example, we have a list of 96 activities that we think communities can take that align well with the state's climate action plan. And so those run the gamut from energy efficiency projects to local conservation plans to vulnerability assessments to working with community members around mental health. So there's a lot of different ways that I think many of your members could find activities within that list that start to resonate with them, but it's certainly not exhaustive. And so thinking about we often think about our physical infrastructure and our ecosystems and ecosystem services when we think about resilience, but it also includes, as I said, mental health around navigating, disasters, natural, the change in the environment, food and energy security, fostering human connection and dialogue. All of these things are really critical to recovering from a hard-hitting natural disaster or weathering some of these slow-moving changes that we see across our communities and across the state. And so, as I said, I worked 15 years in the nonprofit sector, and I think less than half that time was in a role that had climate or resilience in the job title, but I could probably draw some connections to the work that I was doing, whether it was building capacity, building leadership, helping people work better together, have more productive conversations. I think all of those things have the potential to have positive outcomes on, our ability to be resilient in the face of disruptions or changes. And so, I think whether your mission as a nonprofit is youth development or conservation or any other thing, I think there's ways to kind of think critically and connect the way you think about your work to the resilience of the communities that you work in.
I really appreciate that, Brian, a lot. I also appreciate that there's a list that exists. And so I really, Ellis has put in our chat a link to the Community Resilience Partnership, and I'm assuming they could find that there.
It is. Yeah.
You've already given a couple of examples, and what you're talking about is the topic of collaboration, which in the nonprofit sector, we hear that word all the time. And like resilience, like sustainability, there are all these terms that get bantered around, and sometimes it can be hard to wrestle them down to the ground to really practical change. So I was just wondering, with your experience, if you could elevate some examples, maybe even aspirationally, but but I'm sure you have like practical examples of how does a successful collaboration work when you are going into the community, you are talking about state government, you're talking about local government, you're talking about private sector, right? Like, because that's also really critical. When I think about what happened with the storms last year and how that really was one of the motivating factors for some of the governor's investment on supporting coastal communities. I think about towns on the coast of Maine, and it's all kinds of people coming from all kinds of sectors, and it can be hard to figure out how to collaborate towards a shared goal, a shared vision. I just wondered if you had an example or so about how that works well and what needs to happen in order for those to be successful.
Yeah. I think the first step is recognizing that Maine in particular is a small place, and even in state government, which is one of the largest employers in the state, like we don't have the capacity or the know-how to do it all, and we rely on partners with from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector, to really make sure that that the trains are running on time in the best of times, and then when disasters strike or when things are really urgent, state government is not always the fastest mover in the room, and often it is nonprofits and other local players who are able to fill gaps and fill needs in the immediate time. And I think maybe Britt will talk a little bit about this, and when you get to her, that the role that volunteers play in disaster response and disaster recovery is really critical. And so, taking a step back and just thinking about, we don't all have the answers to the questions that we want to work on. We need partnerships with people who have capacities and expertise that we don't have, and so trying to figure out how we blend those well, and understand where certain organizations or certain entities are positioned to act quickly or move in the direction that we all really need to be at that moment, is really sort of a critical piece to collaboration. What are the strengths and opportunities that each of the players brings to the conversation? In the when it's a blue sky day and we're not having an emergency, I think it's really fun to try to fit some of these puzzle pieces together. We at the Office of Community Affairs, one of the things that we're working on right now is assessing the state of some of the technical assistance materials that are out there, that communities and others rely on to help them make decisions or go through planning exercises. A number of those materials need to be updated and revised. They maybe haven't been touched for 10 years or more. And we're partnering with Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, which is a nonprofit, to go through an inventory of those tools, understand what tools are out there right now, where they're located, how long it's been since they've been updated. And then, we will work through a sort of a prioritization to try to bring those tools and resources up to date. And then we're having conversations right now about sort of where all that would live. Does it live within state government? Does it live maybe with one of our academic partners or with another organization outside of government? And so thinking about these partnerships, about who can be the best messenger, who can do some of this work more expediently than government can. So that's a little bit of what's going on sort of in the nuts and bolts with MOCA. And then, through our grant programs that we offer, we're trying hard to incentivize nonprofits, the public sector, the private sector, to work together on projects at the local and regional level. And so many of our grant offerings encourage partnerships between local governments and nonprofits and the private sector. Again, to take advantage of some of those where expertise is located, where capacity is located, and to help communities have difficult conversations about managing climate change or climate risk, or doing the education and engagement that's necessary for really positive outcomes from complex projects. And so we see nonprofits in these partnerships providing some of those outreach and engagement services, and other times providing technical services or analyses, or training volunteers to help residents with things like energy efficiency projects. So there's all different kinds of roles that nonprofits and other players are playing in some of these, local government projects. And I think whether it's the Community Resilience Partnership or the grants from the Housing Opportunity Program or the Coastal Program, they're all sort of encouraging these collaborations that kind of leverage everybody's strengths and try to, reach the best outcomes.
Great. So just I'm going to transition over to Britt in just a second, but just as a way of summing up. So at the end of the day, if a nonprofit wants to engage and learn more about the work that you're doing to support communities with regards to resilience and climate change, where would you suggest they start?
Yeah, great question. So the MOCA webpage is still coming together. Right now, all of the programs at MOCA have their original web pages at their host organizations, and in a couple of days, we'll be launching an updated website that will help get you to that information. So if you're familiar with any of these programs already, it's there. You can Google them, and their web pages will come up, but it's still at their previous agencies' websites. But then, just stay in touch. Most of these programs have newsletters that aren't going to change much in the near future. So either pay attention to the newsletters or sign up for the newsletters. And then, in the next week or so, probably 2 weeks, we'll be launching this funding finder, and we'll be launching the phone hotline so you can give us a call. And if you've got questions, somebody will be there to pick up the phone. It might be me one day, it might be Britt the next day. And we will help you get connected to the programs where maybe you've got some interest or you've got some opportunity there to partner.
That's great. Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate your time this morning, and that's all really great information. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So our next guest is Britt Gleichner-Hayat. She is the new director of Volunteer Maine, otherwise known as the Maine Commission of Community Service. Good morning, Britt. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really delighted to you and I got to meet earlier this year, and I'm just very excited that you're bringing your multiple talents. Britt has quite a background globally, supporting a lot of large initiatives through USAID and all of through the federal government, and many examples. So I'm super excited to welcome her to Maine as relatively new and supporting our communities. So let's start out. So how do you envision Volunteer Maine evolving to meet the changing needs of our communities?
Thank you again. It's really great to be with you. Jen, I know you and I, one of the first meetings I had when I started this work was with you. So I was desperate to understand more about the nonprofit sector, and because I know how critical it is from work I've done in other contexts to helping communities in difficult times and to driving solutions. So I am super excited to be here with you guys. Yeah, I mean, when I started this role, my first week on the job came in the context of AmeriCorps funding cuts. And this was a familiar sight for many organizations that relied on federal funding. So that kind of umbrella of uncertainty is something that hit us all pretty hard in the spring, I'd say. And, through litigation, AmeriCorps, our funding is back restored, and AmeriCorps funding is somewhat stable at this stage. AmeriCorps is an institution that relies on a lot of bipartisan support, and it has that right now. So it is continuing, which is a good thing. But as with a lot, given the federal policy changes that have affected all sectors, there is a high degree of uncertainty. So that's something that we have been, dealing with as an organization. But really moving forward and in a way that's really shown a tremendous amount of strength. And I'll use the word resilience, but in a slightly different way, I think, than Brian was. I just so appreciated his very technical and sound and thoughtful explanation of what resilience means for communities. In our space, we think about, resilience of the individuals and communities that we're working with. And right now it's a time of, I talked about the uncertainty for Volunteer Maine, which again, we've weathered and we feel like we're in a really strong position right now. But there's so much uncertainty still for communities and for Mainers. Services that people rely on are being affected by federal policy changes. And there's a huge crisis of affordability. And this is something we're pretty attempting to be laser focused on, because our mission is to take service and volunteerism and use them as pathways for addressing Maine's needs and for advancing community engagement. That's our mission. Service is a strategy. It is an end in and of itself as well, and that's something we care about. But it's also a force multiplier for affecting change. So, back to kind of the opportunities that we're seeing, in addition to those challenges and how it relates to the vision moving forward, that resilience of people in the communities in our area of volunteerism and service has been incredible. And I just wanted to talk about a couple places I saw it, because I think some of you might have been at our volunteer manager conference. It was our 39th one this summer. It was an incredible conference. And, we talked about it in some like conversations and also in the context of some meetings. Resilience is something you actively build, and it's an adaptation as a result of dealing with crisis. And it is not something that you just, it's not an infinite, a resource that's infinite. You have to keep building it and rebuilding it. And the conference was an example where so many people came up and said, this built my feeling of resilience, my connectivity to the community of people who focus on volunteer management, and it's given me a lot of hope. I also saw that in our AmeriCorps annual gathering of all of our AmeriCorps members. When they got together, there's this, for those of you who have been AmeriCorps members or have been in the AmeriCorps orbit, you know that the pledge includes a line that says, "Faced with adversity, I will persevere." And those AmeriCorps members persevered through 6 weeks of deep uncertainty about whether their programs would continue, and they did. So there's so much opportunity there in terms of that resilience, but also the depth of experience and capability and knowledge and connectivity of our sector is stunning. So we see those all as opportunities. And another obvious big opportunity for us as Volunteer Maine is moving to MOCA and being part of an organization that is thinking bigger and differently about how to be responsive to community. And so we've so enjoyed, I've enjoyed having Brian as a colleague, and all my other colleagues in MOCA, and our team has really been just finding ways to work together. But just briefly on like in vision moving forward, I should say that the vision for Volunteer Maine is very much going to be defined by our commissioners, who are representative of all parts of Maine, and a whole strategy process we're launching in a couple of months, actually, which we hope many of you will be part of. And that will kind of define, really what our big vision is. But in the very near term, I think I do speak on behalf of the commissioners when I say that, one of the things that, speaking to that resilience and what we bring, providing really, well-designed, meaningful platforms for engagement is what we think is so needed right now. It's something that's critical to our social fabric, to being able to achieve a lot of what we want to do as organizations. And that's something that we can do, whether it's through a conference or a monthly networking call, or if it's some kind of ad hoc meeting that we can convene to help different stakeholders coordinate a response to a given problem. Like, for example, we're right now trying to figure out how could volunteerism help meet Medicaid or SNAP eligibility requirements that are increasing in 27. So we're thinking about using our convening power, our multiple relationships to provide those platforms. It's a huge part of our vision. But part of that is also investing in our relationships and collaborating well and being a good collaborator. And that's something we're also really focusing on in the coming, always, but really focusing on invigorating in the coming year and years. And then finally, like excellence in our programs, which I'll, kind of get to. That's one of the main ways that we advance service is through our programming, and we just want to double down on doing the best we can with the management of those programs and getting the word out about them.
That's really exciting. So as you well know, as you already articulated, Nonprofits are likely very eager to, they already do work with Volunteer Maine, and with your vision, I'm sure they're eager to lean in even further to see how they can become part of it. So can you talk about that? How do you see nonprofits engaging with you? And as I asked Brian, how should they start?
Yeah. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, our mission is about service and volunteerism to meet the needs of Maine and advance civic engagement. So, in the service space, a lot of you might know Volunteer Maine, or if you do know Volunteer Maine, most likely you know us as an AmeriCorps program uh, lead. We launch requests for applications for our AmeriCorps programs, and a lot of nonprofits can work with us to design and execute an AmeriCorps program that brings in AmeriCorps members to achieve a given end. We do focus quite a bit on rural and underserved communities. That's a huge priority for us. In fact, we just had an RFA that closed recently for small rural grants. But AmeriCorps programming is one key way that you can get involved with us. AmeriCorps is still alive. It does enjoy a high degree of bipartisan support, and we think that's part of the reason why. We do have funding in 25. Looking ahead, if there is a continuing resolution, there will be funding in 26. So I just want to make sure that I get that out to this community, because I know that there was a lot of lack of clarity about what was the status of AmeriCorps. But if you are AmeriCorps curious, just email us, service.commissions@maine.gov, and we can share that email address. You can find it on our website. Email us, and we'd be happy to give you information in just an email so you could just peruse it. But if I will admit that. We would love to talk to you about that, because that's a critical way to bring service to address a problem that you might see. So we'll talk to you about how could you integrate service into that problem set you're working on, and not only have force multipliers to achieve your ends, but also at the same time enhance community engagement and a nature of service as part of your work. So that's one space. We also have other programs that are service oriented. We take that national service model and apply it here in Maine through our Maine Service Fellows. I see the Sunrise Economic Council might have been here. They have a Maine Service Fellow this year right now. So please, well, I don't want to say speak to them. They're very busy. So don't let us know if you'd like to know about it more. And we also have a Climate Corps as well. So these are two Maine-sized programs that elevate national service model to address needs here in Maine. So if you're interested in learning more about how you could be part of our Climate Corps network as a nonprofit, you could be part of it. Being part of that network gets you access to some professional development resources. You're part of a cohort. We do have some small grants that are coming online in in spring. And so that's one space. And then the Maine Service Fellows, if you have an idea that you want to advance in a community that serves, you can have a Maine Service Fellow for a 10-month period. We could talk to you all about how that works. And then the second space that we work in is volunteerism. And some of you might be most familiar with us in this space because a lot of nonprofits rely on volunteers to achieve their ends. So what we do in volunteerism is a few different things. We promote volunteerism through annual awards, the Governor's Service Awards, which are coming up in April, and we're going to be opening for nominations soon. We also train and support volunteer managers. So if you have a member of your staff who is a volunteer manager, they could be part of our network. We have a small professional development fund for them, which we're going to advertise that a little bit more now, because we want more people to take advantage of it, because we actually do have funding for it right now. And connecting people, learning lessons, some technical assistance, our annual conference. And we also provide something called service enterprise training, which is the highest level of training for an entire organization to orient themselves around how to use volunteerism to achieve their ends at an entire organizational level. And we're going to talk about ServeMaine in a couple minutes, but we also have launched just now the first statewide volunteer matching platform, which is called servemaine.org. And that's where volunteers and volunteer opportunities can get matched. And you have a great also data system backing it up. Last thing I'll say also, because Brian mentioned it, is about emergency management. Another thing that we do, which is more, it's not in our front and center day to day, but it's preparation. We are responsible for the volunteer response centers in the context of an emergency. And servemaine.org would also, under blue skies, it's servemaine.org, but in a disaster, it would become the state's statewide disaster and donation site. So that's another responsibility of ours that we always prepare for, hope to not have to use that capability, but we manage that part of a disaster.
Britt, you mentioned if people have volunteer managers on staff. As I was saying to Brian, the vast majority of our nonprofits are quite small, and so many of our nonprofits are people who are wearing multiple hats. I'm going to assume that someone doesn't have to officially be a paid volunteer manager to participate. And then, sort of part two of that, what would you advise, particularly small nonprofits who may not have a developed volunteer program? What tools should they prioritize if they want to elevate their knowledge and skills with regards to volunteerism and how it can support their missions?
Yeah. No, you don't have to be a full-time paid volunteer manager to participate in all of this. And as a matter of fact, there's a lot of people who are not, that's not their full-time job. And that's one of the challenges that sometimes our volunteer managers talk about. They're dual, triple-hatted, and some of them only actually stay in their jobs for a short time because usually those jobs are a stepping stone to other roles in a nonprofit. And that's understood and something that we kind of integrate into our methodologies and training to accommodate that reality, and also talk about how organizations can flex to meet that. So, I mean, as a first step, I'd say go to our website and look at the volunteer manager site there, and you could sign up. There's a very short form that you could sign up to be part of our monthly network. And I would start there because by networking with your peers is one of the key ways to get information about best practices. We also offer a micro credential that's through University of Maine, like badging, all official.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good way to start to get some basic information and knowledge. And then if you're ready to take it to the next level, we have a volunteer manager course that is asynchronous that's going to be launched in February. We had to delay it a couple of months because of Adobe Captivate licensing issues in the state of Maine. It's such
Of
a
course.
boring reason. It's such a boring reason. It's practical, but that is really the case. It was kind of we needed the platform to function properly for people. So that'll be in February. The big thing I also want to just say to everybody here, and something we've been focusing on that builds on a report from Points of Light, is that nonprofits, and we've talked about this in our conference as well, for those who came this year, we had philanthropy involved. We had Jeanette Andre was one of our keynote speakers, who I know you guys are going to speak to, I think, next week or next month on MANP Connects. We want philanthropy to understand that when nonprofits and organizations use volunteer service well, they are increasing value. And they are actually giving a huge return on a dollar for any kind of donor investment. And when volunteer managers are permitted to do their jobs well, and when nonprofits integrate that into their budget requests, like, we need money for a volunteer manager, or show that you're investing in volunteer management, it ends up paying huge returns and dividends just in terms of value for money, but it also has so many, and the data shows, has so many impacts on community engagement and civic engagement, which is absolutely critical to democracy, which is something that is very much at the forefront of concerns right now. The ability of people to be able to channel their interests, their desires, their needs through a process. And that's something that is suffering right now for a variety of reasons. But using this tool of service and volunteerism is one of the ways to really address that. So that's what I would advise. And I just, this is a priority for us right now, volunteer managers and helping support that sector. And I'll get to it also with Serve Maine.
Yeah. And so with that, as we close out our coming close to the end of our time here, please do you tell us about Serve Maine. I know you've been really excited about it. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, we are super excited about it because it's not just a website. It's also part of this larger strategy to promote volunteerism. So the site itself is a statewide site for volunteer opportunities. So you as a nonprofit can sign up make a profile. It takes about 7 minutes to do it. We've got a good little tutorial. If you have any issues, you could just email us. We will help you. And then you post your volunteer opportunities up on the website. And the more opportunities that are listed there, the better, because we're going to be doing a public launch of this website in probably early January, late December. That's our aim right now. It's really tied to how many volunteer opportunities are up there because it's a chicken and egg. If there are no volunteer opportunities there, we can't promote the site too much because we don't want people to get on and not see opportunities. But the idea here is that you could be a person living in southern Maine and say, I want to do something in another part of Maine and support, and you could find that opportunity there. So we are going to, right now, we're inviting organizations like yours to please sign up and list your volunteer opportunities there. If you need help thinking about how to develop those scopes, let us know. We'll help you to do that. But the process of even putting those scopes up on the website, you'll notice that the website, it's designed specifically for this, it's Galaxy software, some of you may know it. It's designed specifically for this purpose. So it's a management tool for you. And then it also allows you at a click of a button, once you start to get volunteers, to create reports about how many volunteer hours your organization is generating. And it's free for you to use. And it's also free for volunteers to use. And there's also an app that they could have on their phone to easily use it as well. So the benefits to this, again, kind of linking back to what I was saying, is to show that value to potential donors or to your board or your stakeholders. Look at how much we're generating in terms of value in communities. So that's a tool for you. And I really encourage you to list the opportunities there and help us help you enhance your volunteer experience.
That's really, really exciting, Britt. And maybe this is this question that came in specifically to you might be part of how Serve Maine is going to be useful. Julie is asking, hi Britt, I'm a retired nurse educator, but continue as an actively practicing registered nurse. I'm licensed to practice in Maine. Can I join a volunteer list to offer services during disaster responses? So in that case, it's an individual.
Yep.
Are you able to answer that?
Yeah, individuals. So you all as individuals, if you organizations, just as individuals, sign up also on servemaine.org right now as a volunteer. And for that particular question, yeah, you can sign up and then note that you are available in the event of a disaster. So there's an option there for folks to opt in to being contacted in that case. And then I think I'll double check, but I believe you can list competencies. But I think most of the time it's volunteers looking for opportunities as opposed to the other way around. But specifically in the context of a disaster, when you sign up as a volunteer, you can select that you'd like to be kind of part of that platform as well.
Great, that's really useful. Thank you so much, Britt. I'm so excited to see how MOCA shapes out. I love this idea that in a few weeks, we'll be able to call, and who knows, it'll be the lottery in terms of.
You might even get Samantha. Samantha is also answering.
I know. Samantha is the new director of MOCA, and so if in the future, probably sometime in 2026, we'll make sure we invite Samantha on to talk broadly about how MOCA is doing. She's been focusing on just getting the office running up and running, which is really inspiring. So what Brian and Britt, the two of you have shared this morning, is really, really helpful. It's very inspiring. Thank you so much for your time. And as a wrap up today, Britt referenced it, and also she talked about the power of getting together and filling our resilience bucket by being in connection with one another. If you don't know about it already, please check out our Together for Good convening here in Portland at USM on December 4th. It's a full day of activities, which we would love to have you there. Some of it is even wellness based. because it's really going to be about filling our resources with regards to personal and organizational resilience. There's also a second component as part of the full day. There is a MANP Connects, which is what Britt was talking about. It's an in-person MANP Connects, and we are focusing on collaborating, staying together for good, and making sure that we are supporting each other and learning from one another, and get so that we can keep ourselves charged up for all the good work we do for Maine communities. So please check that out if you haven't already. December 4th here in Portland. The links will be in our chat, and it's so exciting to see all of you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for coming. Take care.